Hello.
Hello.
Hang on, it's a bit loud in the background. Yeah, that's better. Sorry about that. We had an issue with Edgar. He's starting school in September and he was not in the group with one of his good friends. So we had to talk to the school and so forth. So it's all sorted out now. So sorry about that.
Nice. Yeah, school starts in September, huh? In Europe.
Yeah. Oh, when does it start for you guys? Is it upside down?
Yeah, it's in the beginning of the year. Like a new year starts, a new school year starts.
Yeah, well, that makes a bit too much sense. I don't think that would work there. Makes way too much sense. Yeah, so how are you?
Doing pretty good. Monday is usually a busy day because I'm prepping food. So I was chopping celery downstairs, getting food ready for the weekend. For the week, I mean. It's good.
Chopping celery.
Huh?
Chopping celery?
Yes. Celery, parsley, dill, you know, some herbs for herbs and spices.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So I've invited a few more people, but I haven't really felt much of, yeah, that hasn't been much response, just a few people, but still. And then today, for my own author work, I have looked at, trust me, it's relevant. It's just a bit roundabout. Actually, I'll share a blog post so you can instantly see what I mean.
Sure.
The point I'm going to be trying to make is we really should look more into how we can make the reading experience of the book better. Because according to research, students don't read very much, which is a bit scary. So the whole thing is, I discovered today again that some of the apps allow for their own kind of libraries. You don't have the normal open save dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just thinking in Author, if you could have tabs for your different subjects, because you know when things are in folders, so they easily get confusing. But the key thing in the screenshot in the open/library is not the tabs. It is that you have published papers, papers in progress, and then you have other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to go from papers in progress to published papers, you just move it up. And what happens then is that document is locked. A PDF is generated and put in the same place, and it says published date. If you want to edit it again, you can do that, but the program will say, this is locked. Would you like to edit a copy? So
Yeah.
over time, you know, you build a library of what you've done.
I see.
And the history 1 and biology 2, that means that's how many papers are in progress. The number 2 is in red because something is about to be due tomorrow or whatever, right? Seems pretty obvious.
These mock-ups, where do you make these mock-ups? Are you using like Figma or something?
No, screenshots and Photoshop.
Screenshots in Photoshop, yeah.
Old school.
The classic way.
It's just simple stuff. And it just struck me that for this little thing, it can be, I mean, it says published papers, papers in progress and so on. If you're not a student or an academic, we can change the headings for you, right? To be in a different thing. Mm-hmm. And then kind of key below for the reader one, as you know, I've been looking at so much of when you read a PDF, then what? How do you somehow indicate the information you would need to find it again? So that actually goes into two things. You can obviously tag, but you know, when you do Command S, you don't get to choose the location. That's in this library, but you can, the thing there says key, you can either write the key sentence or key meaning of that PDF, or you can select that and choose to have that done, as I've shown way down, you know, assign as key sentence from the document.
Yeah,
so that's in your library. That means that the student could take a screenshot of that and show the teacher that, you know, this is how they're getting along. They think they understand these documents. So the whole basic annotation is a big deal. But then as part of this whole thing, I downloaded one of the top, well, okay, the supposedly best ACM hypertext paper from last year. and I open it, now that we're looking at iPad, I open it on an iPad, I open it on the computer. It looks like shit.
Mhm.
You know, it's two columns, first of all, which is useless digitally. And the
Yes.
actual font weight in the left and right column is different.
Mhm.
Right? It's absolutely insane.
Have you
So
managed to try Marvin on the iPad or the iPhone?
no, remind me, it's that for EPUB or PDF?
Well, they open both. They open both EPUBs and PDFs.
I
For
did try
EPUBs,
it quite a while ago when you first mentioned, yes, but I didn't do much with it.
yeah, but the frustration with PDFs is that it's locked, right? And that is very frustrating. Yeah, I don't know if there was a way to dynamically use the contents of a PDF as an EPUB just for reading purposes, but when you send it, it's it's locked in a PDF so that it's one document. It would be better, but PDF is frustrating. I do agree, but it is a standard nonetheless that and it is it's the best standard to send things, and even though it's all broken, which is mad.
When you select text in the ACM produced PDF and copy it, paste it somewhere else, it is a jumbled mess.
Yeah, when you have more than one column and you select text, or even if you have like a different layout, you start selecting like a first paragraph and it selects a little piece of the menu and some weird text on the background. It's horrible. I hate it.
So I think, in order to try to reach more people, I think we should try to redevelop more for volume 2 of what the book can be, even though it'll still be PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is more readable, because it's just simple. But look at more things.
I think for the second volume, we should have a PDF that is just a digital copy of the printed version. Just layout wise, PDF is nice because it remains with the same layout. But I feel like there's a lot more to explore in EPUB as a way of providing these extra features. And if not an EPUB, author has reader has a lot of different things that are great to navigate fast. You can create the glossary, you can navigate to people, you can see the definitions and all that, and all of those things. But what if we try to explore a little bit more of the EPUB, because it's a format that people already know and understand, and then from that we can find out the limitations of EPUB and then build on that to try to kind of upgrade the standard on reader as a default.
Well, the Future of Text Volume 1 was released on EPUB as well. Mm-hmm. I had someone do the conversions, but I cannot provide any programming towards that at all. I have overextended and making so extremely little, as you know, on author and reader, that I just can't afford to do it. The reason I support PDF is it's something you can hand into a teacher. You can't hand an EPUB in.
But an EPUB, you don't need a developer for EPUB. You need a web designer.
Yeah, no, that too. But it's still a developer to an extent. But then, it is reading it on that. Of course, there are EPUB readers for the web and native. But
because one thing that I've been doing quite a lot for the company and for me is looking at the costs for development and to see if I want to get to this point faster, I'm going to need this specific team and it's going to cost me X amount, per month, per year, and things like that. And because of the dollar difference to Brazilian money is so high, it's extremely cheap to hire people in Brazil and India and all these other countries. So for example, my developer in a big company, he's making around like 7,500 reais, which, our money, and that's quite a lot. for Brazil. But if you convert that to like the dollars or to euro, that's about 1,500, which is, it's half of an entry level, junior designer or developer. It's extremely cheap. So just keep that in mind if you ever need, to hire people outside as, for cheaper, but same level quality that look outside the US and UK.
Well, I mean, I started with development in Finland, and then I went to China. The Chinese guy was the one who made Liquid possible, because he was the one who realized you could use services. So, wow, okay. So services is what makes it happen. And we have some people in Russia, southern Russia, close to Ukraine, of all places.
Okay.
So they are sometimes very good, but it's a very disorganized company. So sometimes, it's just ridiculous. But if there's any funding and we need stuff, yes, I'll absolutely talk to you and see who you know. Right now, I just have to.
I'm not saying that this is a project, for me or the people in my company. I'm just saying that there are people in Brazil that's like the cost. If cost is an issue, I don't know how much it is in China or Russia. I've never hired people from those locations, but
yeah, no, I hear you, and I think that's a very good idea. We should look at that, but I guess the first thing we need to do is just keep inviting people. But and also, do you agree that we should do a cash prize for the student competition this time? It may get some of the wrong students, but as long as the criteria are really clear, at least it'll get the message further, right?
I think cash prizes are always good, but I do agree that it ends up inviting people for the wrong reasons, and maybe not make the cash prize the main thing, make it secondary. And because being part of the book, I think it is already something really nice to have, especially for a student, especially for a portfolio, especially for for an area to showcase. But I mean, it is a nice bonus to have, but I wouldn't make it the main attraction.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, though. It is a difficult balance. But what I'm not going to do this year is the whole thing we did before of, getting a signed copy from the other authors and that kind of stuff. That was just too much overhead.
No, I bet it was.
Yeah, that was. But yeah, do you have a list of people you want to go through to invite?
I have the one that I started showing you, and let me open here. And I do have a list of academics that the typography conference I've mentioned that, I was a volunteer for a lot of years. And from that conference, if I open here the site, let me get the site open, GeoCipo. And we have, the list of the speakers from all the years. If we want some people related to design, typography, text, in that sense, I think it would be quite nice. And there's people not just from Brazil, but every year we used to invite 2 or 3 people from outside of Brazil. So either from the US, from Europe. And if you go, for example, to Sao Paulo, the green one, we had an event, we had a conference, Frode, it's quite a nice story. We invited Vincent Conner. He's the person that created Comic Sans, the font.
Oh, wow, cool.
For Microsoft. And we created the whole visual identity for the conference in Comic Sans for a professional typography conference.
That's really clever. I like that.
So that was quite fun. And he came, he had a really good time. We did it, even did it like a small, we took people to walk around the city and to find things that were made in Comic Sans and take pictures of those things as well. So it was quite fun.
That's a very good idea. Yeah, if you want to invite more type people, it definitely is an important part of text.
Yeah, since it's been going for 10 years as well, I'm gonna make a short list of, half a dozen people
Yeah, I'm
that
just
would
looking
be
at the site
interesting.
now.
And there's always a lot of women involved as well, which is very nice.
Yeah.
And especially inside calligraphy, it's mostly women. Women tend to go more for calligraphy, which is pretty cool. And then one idea that we can try to bring from calligraphy is the evolution of type for text. It started very script, very ornamental, and then it started simplifying, and now it's it's blocky text, and then emoji came along, and then it's more pictographic now, and then where is it gonna go next? That exploration seems to be interesting as well to explore.
Yeah.
But the ones that I made last week were these ones. Let me share. Share screen. So these four, and then one more. James Gleick from the book The Information.
Yeah, James Gleick is a good one. Do we have access to him? I don't know how to find him. I think I've looked for him before.
I don't, but I can look around. We can maybe ask around, post in the community, see if anybody has connection. Maybe what's that journalist's name? Maybe he has some connections. And then I know Seth Godin is hard as well to reach, but I think these other three here, Georgia Rangel, Brooke Gladstone, and Abby Covert, I think these three would be easier to get in touch with, because Seth is more of a celebrity, and I think James Gleick is more of a celebrity as well.
James Gleick does have a website contact. I can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Find the, there we go.
I'm very interested in Brooke Gladstone's point of view, because her book talks a lot about media and how the media manipulates people, and text is completely connected to that because of either the storyboarding part or the copywriting part, or the words used, or how people react to certain terms and phrases. And
See.
hey, Mark.
Hi.
Oh, other people.
There's the computer lib behind you. Oh, Frode, I did upload the Future of Text book to archive.org, and it's there now. So we have that.
Excellent.
We have a backed up copy.
Do you have a link for that? Maybe I should put
Yes.
that on the page, actually.
We do. Let me get it.
Thanks. Mark, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be harassing Dave to send that email. We all need to do that. I think I've sent him 20 messages today.
Well, no, I've been busy peddling. There's big Tinderbox 9 just went out, and I rewrote, having worked all weekend to get my sort of actual documentation for it up, only to find the one thing we hadn't been testing in the last beta test was the actual HTML export. And so there was some weird regression bug that broke nearly all the links in this whole 2,000 pages of my HTML. And funnily enough, in the apps help.book, which is also produced the same way. I've been busy unspooling that. I looked at Adam's latest thing, which he sent me, because you may have seen, or Fred may have seen, I sent him, I did a lot more work on the on my database. Speak of the devil, and he comes. Hi. So I just got around to looking at Adam's thing. And it's interesting, actually, what you wrote, Adam, because it sort of confirms what I thought. The fun of playing with this stuff is you begin to realize what the real visualization problems are. You know, once you're not banging your head against just getting the data to render, it's this sense of, well, what's the right amount of depth? You know, how much do we want to get on screen? And I don't think there are any particular answers there.
Oh, just updated the site to reflect that Raphael has uploaded the book to archive.org. Sorry for being a bit distracted. Hello, how was your hangover, Adam?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Good.
Yes, Midsummer, another one ticked off.
It's funny, it only exists in Sweden, even though, you know, Norway's next door and we're at the same degrees. Well, we have Santans, we have the one kind of fire, but that's only not the same.
But I guess you're still have a hangover from May 17th.
Yeah, that's also a good thing.
I do remember going to the sort of summer fest in Bergen. This must have been about '84, and that was a bit of a riot. I seem to remember a lot of thick heads.
Year of Macintosh, yes. Yeah, so Raphael and I've been going through a few people to invite and stuff. The thing, Adam, that we've been chatting about has been how to distinguish if we take the entire reference section into the visual meta. And you have many points, but I'm still not sure what you want, because I would like to give you what you want, because I think you understand this very well. Let me just see if I can find what we have now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Well, if you just to kind of get past this point, because it's becoming a bit important. So yeah, under structure here we have, okay, let's actually hang on. Let's go to the example with headings and just do this real quick, because I think I've just misunderstood you a little bit, Adam.
I'm not really sure what we're talking about here, but
that's okay. Why would you need to know what we're talking about? I'm going to paste it into a chat what we're talking about. We're talking about this bit.
Are you sharing yet, Fred?
Sure, I can share.
No, yeah.
Sharing, right? Yeah, no, it's just this bit of, if we have all the references in the document actually in the visual meta, what's the best way for the system to know that we're separating between author 1 and author 2? And don't forget, they need to have a number so that this can correspond to where these citations are in the body of the text. So normally we would have the numbers in hard brackets, so that's why I thought that would be good enough. But what do you guys think? Excuse me.
And would that number be in the text as well as a regular reference number?
It would be. Hi, Peter.
What you've lost there is you've taken the outer wrapper off the bib text. So we've lost the type of article that it is, which also included the UID.
No. This is, you know, when the BibTeX is starts up here.
Yeah.
The introduction, then there is citing. This is about, you know, now it's article. This is about what this is.
Yeah, but that's
no, I understand. Yeah. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Do we need that though? Sorry.
Yeah, for other BibTeX processors to be able to properly render it.
Because that's what's used in the...
That controls the interpretation of separate BibTeX fields.
Yeah, so you need, after the ISBN, for number 1, you need a closing set of curly brackets. BibTeX processors should cope with that trailing comma, some don't. So I would not put it in, because although it's optional to have a trailing comma there, I found some less well-behaved parsers just break on that.
Is this what you mean then?
After the ISBN, so 2 lines up from where you are, there's a comma at the end of the line.
Yeah,
No, next line down,
yeah,
but there's nothing after it. So you don't, some parsers aren't clever enough to realize that there's an empty bit after there and they just break.
okay, thank you. Detail, but the details that matter.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's
Yes.
an error here. This obviously should be
2.
very good.
And the equals before the author sign wants to go in each case. Now, normally, and as Peter's just pointed out, after where it says at references or at article or at book, you normally have effectively a UID string. It can be, frankly, whatever you like, but it is the UID that a BibTeX parser uses to find in a LaTeX document the reference to that citation. That is the key link. Now, you don't necessarily have to use it. You will never see it in the published paper. But if you ever get a bit of BibTeX, probably the BibTeX parser will, if nothing else, moan that you haven't given it a key. And when it says it hasn't given you a key, what it's saying is you haven't given it that UID.
Well, it doesn't show here, right?
No, because that's the rendered output. But if you're passing it around,
Just
if you want,
type what you want. I'll post it.
well, I am, but here's the point. We need to think about, if we're only going, you've just copied something that is in a rendered form that you may be able to process by eye because you know what it means, but there is no markup in what you just looked at in that PDF
Mark.
to tell you what that reference meant.
Mark and Adam and Peter, just tell me what you want. You're the BibTeX and parsing people. You know, there's nothing to discuss because what you think is correct goes in.
Well, that's what I said. I would allow for there being a UID in there because that gives you something that at least.
But just give, no, that's fine, but just give me the text and chat and I'll very happily paste it in as an example.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm with you.
But in a way, I think you're talking about 2 different things because, as I understand it, Frode identifies it by the number in the brackets, and he also puts that those brackets as a regular printed reference, in that style. So it wouldn't work for other styles. Then you need to have it in a linear form to 1 to 500 inside those brackets. That would be the corresponding UID. You get it. So it has actually a printed identifier instead of a hidden one.
Yeah, so the 1 and the 2, the print are outside the BibTeX, as it were. The question is whether you need to include the key or a dummy key, because if you want things that are going to read this and assume that is BibTeX, they are going to complain if they don't find a key. Now, the user, the consumer of the BibTeX, doesn't have to use that key because that can be it can be anything you like for an individual. So when I download BibTeX references from something, the one thing I normally change is a key to one I understand, and it doesn't matter what I use, but I use my own code for that. They're not generally considered canonical. So that's an incomplete reference, that one there, because there's nothing after the MISC. After the MISC, there should be something which can be whatever you like, but that's the key.
But isn't that up to the reader to add that if you have a parser and you want to ingest it into the system? Because this is...
Right, so the whole point here is I thought we were, well, yes, but I would probably put in a dummy key. The point being that we're putting this in saying this is BibTeX, and a BibTeX parser will normally expect there to be a key. Now, whether it uses it or whether the process downstream changes it or not, it doesn't really matter. But if we don't give it a key, it will throw an error saying there isn't a key. So it seems to me not beneficial to create and to willfully create an error state that we don't
Mark,
need.
Can you just give me an example, please, and we will just put it in.
Right. Okay. So on the line above where your cursor is, at the end of the line, after the curly bracket, paste ABC123. It doesn't matter what it is. That's what you the user. So in your own reference manager, stepping back into old world stuff, that's something you decide. And when you make a citation in a LaTeX document, you'll put citation ABC123, and the whole build process finds this.
What is this called, Mark?
That's called the key, is my understanding. So it's effectively the UID of that. It's the UID of that BibTeX reference within the overall BibTeX list.
Is it?
You might have hundreds of references.
Is it a local UID or is it a global UID?
It's local insofar as you set it. It's a private thing that you set. It's global within your BibTeX document. You can't have two keys the same. But I might use a different key on my system for the same reference, because you might use a different one because.
Oh, that's fine. So just call it that.
But Mark, so why should that be printed globally in the because
Right.
I don't see the point of having it in the public document then.
Well, what I'm saying is basically you want a dummy in there, because if you don't put a value in at all, something that's expecting to parse BibTeX will get to @article, look in there and say, there's no key, because a valid BibTeX reference has a key in it. What the key is neither here. So it can be a dummy, but what I'm just trying to point out is that I would expect a BibTeX parser to throw an error, even if you don't say, well, Peter might have a more coherent view on this. Understand the programming.
So if I go into ACM library, do they have dummy keys when you get an
No, they provide a key, but you can change it if you want.
Okay, so
the one they provide is the DOI number currently, but it changes, and different publishers use different keys. There is no requirement for it to be a sort of a canonical thing. There's no reason it couldn't be, but the convention is that as long as it's consistent within your bib document and your citation references in your LaTeX document, the two will work. But as I say, Peter's got his hand up and probably is about to give us a much more sensible explanation of this.
Well, I'm thinking maybe we actually should think about whether we want to standardize on a method of generating a true globally unique ID, so that we could simply say, as part of the visual meta standard, we'll take, CRC 32 of all of the fields in our BibTeX record, or use one of any number of libraries. There are a few out there that are time-based, and we'll grab the MAC address off of the machine that's running on, combine them with a little crypto magic, and guarantee that you can generate, thousands of them per second for the next 200 years without running into a conflict, and just standardizing on it that way. The other thing to think about is a distinction between that key and sort of a local alias. That's the thing that you want to type when you're typing your document, because I'm going to want to make sure that it's easy for me to cite Doug Engelbart's paper on whatever by something real short, Doug 67 or something, which will work for me because I'm constantly citing the 67 paper, but it wouldn't necessarily work as a global alias. So you could have just like a local alias, and in that case, you could explicitly say it doesn't matter whether there's a conflict, because if there are two local aliases that come in, we'll use the canonical global key. Otherwise, we can use the local alias.
Right. So I think we need to
something like
wait.
that to help standardize, since we're already coming up with the visual meta standard. There's no reason that we can't say use this library. And there are a few standard hash functions that we can take a look at that have implementations across all the major programming languages. So we just pick one that doesn't look too long, that has implementations everywhere, and go with that as the recognized official way to come up with the truly unique global ID to attach to the records. And I kind of think that it should be generated based upon the actual content of the reference, so that if the reference content gets changed, that would result in a new unique global identifier. So using a crypto hash kind of makes sense. You could prefix it with VM, so you know that it's a visual meta key that you've created, as opposed to whatever your local nickname key is.
So this is an interesting issue, and I just sent an email to Jacob, who's building it here, wondering if he can maybe join us on Friday. He also wants to get rid of JSON that we're using, and so it'll be interesting to hear what you guys all have to say. But right now, I think this is okay as it is now, right? There's nothing awful about it, unless you guys say so. So,
One thing to think about here is the bracketed format, as that would be required to have things in brackets for this system then.
You mean for the other bits where we?
No, but when you cite something in the document, how does it find Mark Anderson? So it has to be through the bracket 2.
Of course, someone's going to write code that assumes 0-based indexing instead of 1-based indexing.
Yeah, so we should probably have a sentence to say that. So we have here, we have paratexts. So we have references, and see what I've done? That's my little hack. That's how it says in the document, it will be a number inside hard brackets. So that could also then be, soft brackets if people use it.
Yeah, so indicate starting at 1. So that someone doesn't start with 0 and then throw something off.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just the simplest thing, but I don't think we need to worry too much about this now, because if we get the partnership that we're hoping for to do this trial pilot thing, I'm sure they would have a billion opinions. So as long as we're not giving them something that is clearly broken, as long as the basics of it works, I think we're fine.
Do we want to, one of the things I noticed you've used in your 2 example references, you've used 2 different naming styles. Was that deliberate?
I did.
Because one is first name, last name.
Crying out monkey.
And the other one is last name, first name. Now, both are valid. The problem is
they shouldn't be valid together.
The first one looks nicer, but is more likely to be parsed wrongly, because as we discussed previously, you've basically got prefix, first name, middle initials, name precursor, name suffix, and you can't just say it doesn't matter, because unfortunately for some people it does, and there's no getting around it. And if I recall, the last name, first name one sort of does it better, because you start with saying what is effectively the listing item name, which is what most of the primary listing sort will run on in a reference list.
Yeah, I think we did solve this, or rather you guys told me how it should be last time.
But anyway, it's not something we have to do live now, but I just bear that in mind. And I think also we discussed the fact there are at least 2 different ways of the order of names within the individual name section.
But it's fine. This is fine. If we say it has to be last name, comma, first name, and we're kind of key, we're safe, right?
Yeah, because the fact that the overall standard may be more forgiving is neither here nor there. If we say that's what this system expects, I think that's a perfectly fair thing. It just needs to be cited somewhere where the person checking a parser should be able to deal with both. I think, I don't know how to write one, but I would imagine, I suspect a lot don't, because I suspect what most are written for whatever that organization uses. And then it just barfs when it gets one from somewhere else.
So
I think we should have the notion of a local key and a global key, and the regular plain old key would just be the local key to within the LaTeX publishing system that somebody's using, whereas the global key would be something that'll be independent of words created and move around. And ideally, comparing global keys should work so that you won't have to actually look at any of the fields. If 2 global keys are the same, that should guarantee you that all of the field data is identical across both records, so we don't have to spend time actually comparing them on a field by field basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to show you guys this. This is primarily for you, Adam. There's something here called the hypernotes. Are you familiar with it? I put it in the chat thing. So.
Nope, I haven't seen it.
Well, this one, okay, so this is kind of a competitor to Notion and Rome and all of that stuff. Yeah, he does talk a lot. So you have
It's
the
just a
bidirectional-
force directed graph by the look of it.
Yeah, that's one of the end results, but there's also this thing called Muse. That's the sponsor, but also apparently quite good, where you, and DoMarks, there's a, yeah, anyway, please have a look at it whenever. It's a bit chatty, it's 13 minutes. But
Yeah,
it's,
I'm familiar with Muse, but not the other app you showed.
oh, yeah, so, okay, cool. Yeah, Hypernotes, Spaces, Magnetic, these are really related things. And I think as a community, we need to be aware of them. But don't worry, we're not going to watch the first 8 minutes of In the Heights, although you.
What's the video name again? So I can look it up here.
Oh, I put the link in our chats.
Oh, okay.
Is it there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
seen.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
So
we should note that the Summerfest promotion is running. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a copy of Tinderbox or Devon Think and you want to get one, they're on sale now.
from where? What's
Look for
the?
Summerfest 21. I'll find the URL and paste it into the chat in a minute.
If I look for Summerfest 21, I don't think that'll be what comes up first.
Summerfest, do you mean Summerfest 21? You want Summerfest 21 all one word, and put Mac, and you'll probably get. There you go.
That's it. You have it.
It's actually running off Eastgate's server, I think. But confess I have most of these apps, or a good number of them.
Yeah, I want to put author on here.
Well, the guy probably talked to is Mark Bernstein then.
Hmm. Oh, sorry, that's what I clicked on. So Scrivener is obviously one of my competitors. So okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
And Eon Timeline 3 is about to be out fairly soon.
Oh, here's Devon Think.
Yeah.
Artisanal software. Wow.
Well, they're mostly small shops, which was the sort of
Mhm.
concept behind it.
Have you
and
never had a
they're-
handcrafted coffee at Starbucks?
Yeah. Well, I must say, I mean, Devon Think's now moved to a subscription, which actually, if you use it, makes sense. Bookends is sort of, it seems to run what's almost like a subscription, because basically it somehow seems that you run out of free updates after some while. But I use it enough to make it worthwhile. And it's another thing, you get these little shops and it seems the guys never sleep. You send an email and you get an answer straight back, which is really useful when you've hit a wall.
That's
Well,
the downside of Google putting out so much free software. People have come to expect zero to be the price point. It
Yeah.
makes it very hard for independent developers to make a living.
It really does.
Yeah.
I'm not going to show you the screen again now that author is free and people should pay for an upgrade to export. What do people do? Just copy the text at the end of it and paste it somewhere else? I don't know what they do.
Mm,
Absolutely crazy. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for this.
yeah.
I just wanted to show you guys something here briefly. Well, maybe not super briefly, that just went through with Raphael as well. I relearned today that quite a lot of modern word processors don't use open and save dialog box much. They have their own internal library, just like Adobe Lightroom and so on. So you can actually subvert Command O to show something else. I actually thought that was illegal because Apple's, a bit sensitive.
Mm.
So the idea is, first, just from a student perspective, see what you think. So imagine this in author, where you, at the top, you have tabs. They are essentially folders, but it's just to allow you to organize in this different way. One of the problems I have as a student is the difference between what I'm actually working on now and what are just drafts and notes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that it will, when you make a new document, actually, that's kind of important. Didn't I add that here? Sorry, everyone. There should be a save. Yeah, so, right. When you save, you have to choose the subject and you can specify the due date. So that means that when you're in this view, you have the due date right here. So you can see when your next documents are done. It should be done, right?
Yeah.
The point of this, because it seems like very much like a product thing, is I have a problem that when I have handed in or submitted or whatever a document, what do I do with it then? I'm not anal enough, to put it that way, to put it in a correct archive and all of that stuff. So the idea is when the paper is done, you just drag it up to published papers. It will then lock the document.
Oh, I like.
Thanks. So it'll make a PDF export immediately. So you have the original export, what it would have looked at the same time.
Mhm.
If
I've
you
got to
don't-
figure out what version of my December World Futures Review article is the one that I can legally share with people, because it has to be like the one that was the final submitted copy before they went to press and added their page numbers to it after all changes have been made.
Mm.
I have such a sea of final edits at the end that's a nightmare.
Ooh, that's an interesting idea. So one of the things perhaps you want to do is you want to almost crystallize a preprint, your submitted preprint.
Yes, yes.
Which is in effect what you're doing. But I would just in the general documentation make this point, because even if you're a student at this point, what you're doing is the process that you will later be doing as if you stay in the academic field, where you're doing this submission. And I mean, I know a lot of this is driven by copyright paywalls and things, but it's the world we live in at the moment. And I've had to go back and reconstruct a paper because I realized that the only PDF I had of it was actually, I'd still got all the copyright block in, and it shouldn't be in there because people get excited. So I think that's a really nice idea.
Yeah, thanks. So the idea here is also, and I don't understand why this isn't done more. When you first use author, it'll ask you who you are. Because if you're an undergraduate or postgrad, these labels should be different, right? If you publish papers, it's probably going to be handed in papers.
Yeah.
And those differences are kind of important when it's something personal, right? But so the other key is, and this is where I really would like to get your opinion as well, is when you're reading in Reader and you do Command S, it doesn't allow you to actually save, but it's a way to get this little dialogue up, where you can, of course, add tags, but you can also add key, what is the key part of this document? And
Do those go into Finder? Do those go into Finder metadata?
No, because it turns out that Finder tags are horrible and useless and old and rotten, basically. But so imagine if when you're reading, you come across a sentence that you feel encapsulates the document, assign as key sentence, control click and assign, right? You don't have to write it yourself if you don't want to. But the point is that it gives you this. So these two documents here have a key sentence, so it's underneath.
Nice.
It helps you a little bit yourself, but it also, this is the problem. Students statistically don't read very much anymore. And professors are having a hard time making them read. So if we could do something like this, then they could just take a screenshot of this, send it to the professor, and it's like, this is what I've assigned. And the professor at a glance can see if it's complete rubbish or if it makes some sense, right?
Oh, Frode, do we have any notion of version control that you have planned for author? Because it would be really nice if when I'm doing drafts, I would be able to save it at one point in time and be able to get back to that version, and also have the visual meta associate the specific versions with it so that I can make sure that I can get back to that version and reference that, because sometimes you have more than one live version kicking around out at different places. As far as implementation goes, there are a couple free version control systems, and probably you could just drive that entirely through AppleScript without having to build one inside of Author. You could just simply tell someone, go out, if they have Homebrew on their Mac, tell them install Darks on Homebrew, and then use AppleScript to have Darks manage the versions for you and generate the diffs between versions, which is also an absolutely invaluable thing. You really, in the Darks version control system, there's a what's new command. And if you do what's new, it will show you where the different change chunks were within the overall document.
But
And
that's a bit rich for Author at the moment, but we do have integration with Time Machine, so we can do this kind of stuff.
This was funny enough. Presently, this came up in our sort of group, our lab group discussion this morning, and part of it was trying to figure the sort of where the sweet crossover point between the computer science formalism of versioning and the sort of more humanist thing of, yeah, this is the important one I did, or, you know, this is the version I sent to somebody, where often, you know, basically you have the same thing. Essentially, you've got all your diffs, your present version arguably is just the sum of all the diffs that go before. But somewhere in that stream, you want to be able to say, no, this one is important for reason I now give, which is something, I mean, you can sort of do it in a Google Doc if you poke hard enough at it, but it's not centered. And I think that this is something I've actually seen in my recent study is people tend to get thrown straight into full-on software versioning, which just freaks most people out who've not met that, because it's way too much for what they need. But at the same time, they don't acquire the habits. You know, so we're all in there, you know, it's sort of, you know, my doc draft 123 / something else / dot whatever dot, because essentially what people are doing is they're persisting their versioning information in the file name, which is just not ideal. And certainly in the Mac OS ecosystem, this sort of lightweight versioning is fairly easily done, although there isn't a method. For instance, Time Machine will show your explicit saves as discrete, well, as separate from time saves. So in other words, it takes, if you don't do anything, it'll take a sort of snapshot for you. But it doesn't necessarily tell you why you chose to save the document. What there isn't is something that, whether you call it or it prompts you to say, why on earth are you saving it now? What's the reason? And the answer may be, well, I'm just closing down for the end of the day. But the more important thing is prompting people to get in the habit of saying, no, this was important, this was the draft I sent off to my supervisor, whatever.
Yeah, the real frustrating thing about using the version control systems is taking the time and having to go back to the command line in order to apply the notes as to the versions. The other thing is I tend to have 2 or 3 tasks that are running in parallel. So in order to have the version control system not get mucked up, I have to stop and explicitly save. So say I'm in the process of, you know, defining some new function. So I'll say, no, defining X will be my note on the version. And then I will notice that there's an egregious typo in some code that's on my screen. So what I have to do is I have to stop editing X, then go to fixing typo, then save the fixing typo version, then go back and restart fixing X again, sorry, read it back to defining X for the much. So it would be really nice. There's like some little palette with a couple buttons for the tasks that are open. So you could just click to automatically generate those save points for you. Doing it by hand winds up adding so much overhead to your work that after a while you stop doing it, which is not good. So you want to have, and it's also the same sort of thing with time tracking too. And I could see the 2 functions being integrated so that when you do your little time tracking thing to switch from task A to task B, you could basically have a task list. And then as you click between different tasks, that would both log how much time you're spending on a task, plus automatically do the versioning checkpoint. Then later on at the end of the day, with patch-based version control systems, you could bundle up all of the patches for each task and turn them into a single patch that would represent edits that I made on Tuesday versus new functions I defined on Tuesday versus documentation I wrote on Tuesday.
But thinking back to the simpler sort of student thing at this point, because that's quite a rich, that's a deep and rich thing, of which I see the sort of the sense and the idea that you're driving there. But I think certainly at this early stage, some way, certainly capturing, so getting people in the habit of just capturing why they're learning to choose the moment to capture that a certain edit has a preeminent position amongst the list of edits, which is a slightly different thing. It's sort of interlaps with version control, but it's not as defined as that, because in this sense, you don't care how many edits there were between, you know,
Right, you want to
This-
batch everything up to this point.
Yeah, so this is a much lighter weight thing, but I think it's quite important to get people in the habit of, because it's as creative actually in the general workplace as it is for a student. You know, people do things, and then a year later, somebody and the person's left, and somebody's trying to find which of the 14 documents all called the same. Because you know, some will be after the time you want, some will be before. None will, like us, not be anywhere close to the date you think is important. And you're literally often left trying to play around with a file name and a date, whereas actually having even some fairly minimal metadata traveling with things, you know, and I've definitely seen this. This is a current problem in I know in preservation stuff for the Public National Archive, because there is no metadata on a lot of documents. You just have no idea what's inside them, or why they were saved.
Yeah, so that can go a lot of places. I think a very valuable thing was the discussion this morning on where to take notes. And this, just give you the start and the end and see what you guys think. The start of it, for me, it's been extremely stressful and frustrating over the last few weeks of how, you know, when you read a document, where should you make your note? Should you make it in the document? Should you make it in a note-taking application? Now on iPad, there's this quick note, which allows you to write a document that, a note from anywhere that is associated with where you were. So it kind of, in a way, solves the issue and so on. That was the first half of the discussion. The second half of the discussion, Dave Miller brought up the point that when you are learning something or doing research for a project, you will make a lot of notes, a lot of research, and it will be messy, but it's your mess, so that's fine. But what deserves to go into your more long-term thinking space is something else. And that's something that I don't really see in the Notion and Rome people very much. The whole GTD, where you have different, you know, you go through and you filter for specific things, doesn't seem to happen. I wonder if you guys have thoughts on that. I think that would fit a lot with our work.
And that it was a very similar point to what Mark just said, that some versions of documents that could have hundreds of edits to them, some versions or some points in time are very important for that document, and that should also go into your long-term archive. But you don't want to have hundreds of versions of a document saved in your long-term archive. You want some very specific snapshots in time.
I'll give you an example of, you know, the sort of thing I was thinking about when I was up in town is I would like, as someone, you know, running it, if I was running a sort of government department or something, to say, right, this treaty we'd be negotiating, and be able to just ask the metadata system and said, right, okay, so the key drafts happen at this date, this date, this date. And this is coming out, because if people bother to capture that, but they don't, and no one actually the only way you know is if you're lucky enough that the person who was there at the time happens to remember what they did. That's as fragile as it is. And this is information we're dropping on the floor for no good reason. Then the affordances are not good, and no one has any training. And I think what's really interesting, and what, you know, Faber's talking about capturing some of this stuff at the SAVE is just gently teaching us, helping ourselves to help the computer help us. If we don't tell it important things that we then ask it for, how on earth? And this is the fallacy of AI. So this is what I think is happening with the sort of the Rome bucket, is that I put it in there, and then a clever person makes a clever algorithm that just magically finds the answer. And that may happen, but I don't think it's happening in the next few years. And we need to be a bit more savvy. But and the missing bit is we're not at the moment making very good metadata capture mechanisms. And I think if we did, we'd get quite a useful uplift from that, and also we'd acquire good habits as we work and write in a digital environment.
Habits are good, but I think we should also design the tools for it. Like the little thing of the list I showed earlier, where you drag the document up to share it's been published. You know, that took a lot of thinking to happen like that. I'm not saying it's a great idea, but it helped me solve a few things. So how can we work on building an environment where you have one set of knowledge stuff that is different from your general right now knowledge stuff. Mark, you're right. We do need procedures for it, for sure, and learning. It's like everybody has access to a pen and paper. Doesn't mean they can all write, like Shakespeare.
Well, a linked sort of thing to what you're mentioning also about in your sort of library sense is we also touched on this morning, this fact that when you read things, apart from whether you agree or disagree with a paper or something, but just sticking for the moment with papers, but it could be books or it could be web pages or something, you look at something. There are some things you just need to know about because they're canonical, and it doesn't matter whether you like it or not, you're going to have to know about it. There are things that you think are important and they're worth knowing where they are, but you don't have a place for them at the moment. There are things that you definitely know you want to go back to, and then we're straying into the sort of thing that interesting that Frode sort of just showed, and we might even want to capture, a really sort of key sentence or something from that. And so there's also this sort of triage thing, because you want to keep all these various things, but actually they actually have very different meanings, and that meaning may change over time, but you sort of it would be massively helpful to know the stuff that is just at the far end of the shelf you don't touch very much, as opposed to stuff you're going to want to touch often. Raphael. You mute.
I think Adam raised his hand first.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead. Yeah, okay. I think there's two things that came to mind hearing you guys talk. The first one is there's this method of Japanese organization to optimize for most accessed files. And this was, I think, physical files, physical papers. So if you have like a shelf full of documents, papers, magazines, whatever, and you pull something out from a random place in that shelf, you're always going to put it back to the right-hand side. And then as you do that, you have the most accessed files on the right-hand side. And then as you go to the left, it's less accessed.
I do that with my suits.
You do that?
My suits, yeah.
Nice. So that's a very nice way, and it's very simple to explain and to find things. And then the second method is related to education, which is the difference between just in time and just in case. I don't know if you've heard this before, but just in time learning is when you need to find something, you know where to get it. And even if you don't know what it is, you know how to find it, you know where it is, and you know the tools to get there. And just in case is learning for a future case where that might be needed. The problem with just in case, which is the traditional method of education, they teach you everything just in case you need it, is that things get outdated very quickly. So the just in time method works very nicely if we can get people in that mindset of finding the information and providing them the tools to find the information. So I think that connects with note-taking in a way that, note-taking is a just-in-case method. I'm highlighting all these things just in case I need it. I know I highlighted them, right? But a just-in-time method would be, making the tools and the findability of the things you need to find a lot more user-friendly and a lot more effortless, so that you can find them whenever you need to find them. So I think I just wanted to bring that to the table as tools for thought.
Yeah, Adam, I think this relates a lot to your work, what Raphael just said, but yeah, what have you got?
Yeah, it's slightly similar thing. I think it's good to have kind of a verb an archive verb where you put things in the basement. So all the old logs for projects that you most likely won't need again, or very seldom need again, that you can archive them, and they are still there, but behind a checkbox or something, so they don't pollute or turn up in the search result unless you really want to go down to the basement. So for all the things that are more.
Can I say before we go to Peter, Adam, right? Can I come in? Are you done?
Yep.
Because sorry, Peter, just 1 second. I'm thinking that, Adam, but exactly the opposite. The reason is I come from a photography background, and in Lightroom and Photos, I never delete pictures and I never ever archive or hide them because they always have continuous value. However, the pictures that have special value, I turn into a book. So maybe we make it so that it is not the getting rid of that's the act. The act is of highlighting a special kind of collection, but it's the same thing, but you know what I mean?
I think the others, it feels easier to do that. Archiving sort of seems to carry a weight, doesn't it? And now I've got to make a decision, and that wasn't the decision I wanted to make now, and it's somehow going to affect me for the rest of my life, and so I'll put it off. I'll just leave it where it is. Whereas actually sort of saying, no, this is something I'm definitely there. Because also, if your book then becomes too full, that's nature's way of saying, well, maybe we want to kick a few things out. They aren't that important anymore.
Peter, you had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah. One thought I always have is the notion of the half-life of information. It's something I wish I'd thought about back when I was in law school. There are some courses that are based on fundamental timeless principles, so things might change a little bit going forward, but 80% of the material from that course is still going to be relevant in 20 years. Then you have other areas like tax law that have a half-life of the next administration. And unfortunately, anytime you put getting credits taking classes like that, you'll have the class. I mean, you'll get a very loose framework of what the law sort of is, but it's almost guaranteed that within 2 or 3 years of your graduation, you might as well burn the textbook because the cases in it are going to be completely irrelevant and overwritten. The underlying statute will have been edited so many times it won't even remotely look like the original. So you have that notion. Then also the notion of purpose. And this is one of the things that annoys me with my public library. They have the absolute worst curation of material for discard. They look at the date of the book. And if the book is more than so many years old, out it goes. And there's no way that as a user of the collection, I can say, hey guys, when it comes time to get rid of books, this particular book has some really important algorithm. The programming language might not be current in 10 years, but the idea in this book, in chapter 7 and chapter 8, you're not going to find anywhere else. And under no circumstance should you get rid of this. Just modify the record that the reason you want this book is because of what's in chapter 7 and 8, as opposed to the title of the book and its general summary on the back cover.
An example of why group annotations are important. For instance, with what Adam and Mark is working on. When I started my studies, one of the first things I did was beg Mark to tell me what's important, because I knew he had looked into the hypertext papers. He knew what was canonical. So, if Mark could have sent me, it would have been a huge favor because it was a lot of work. But if he would have sent me the kind of view that Adam made that had a couple of stars on it, that would have been very useful, because the notion of canonical, like Doug 62 paper, it's a big deal in our industry. A student or anyone else shouldn't have to spend more than 2 seconds finding it. But then there's a lot of drops in between. But the notion of time, as you saw in my little mock-up of the create a new document in author, you can set the due date. It would be, that for a student, that gives an immediate benefit. It's not drudgery to do that because it means that they have integrated with their calendar, they can see when their papers are due. But if we could find a way within the field you're talking about, Peter, when you're creating a new thing, to be able to set its horizon, which could be forever, or it could be what you said, this is created by the current administration, time to revisit at election time, so to speak. It may not be valid after that. Very useful.
And that was done in the paper-based world. As I remember when I was one of my sort of second jobs was effectively as a private secretary, and that was there was a constant bring-up cycle, and because you couldn't do it, it was done as a chore. So once a week you would have, amongst everything else, you would have a series of old, effectively document folders, but strands of data, and your job will be to go through and weed it. And so you would look for stuff that was time expired, you would annotate why you got rid of it, and because at some point you got to burn it. But and that that process has been lost in digital systems because we have a hubristic assumption that a clever computer process will taken over, but I haven't seen one yet.
That
Interestingly,
reminds me
this is
of that,
one of the real,
security classification marked
Oh, yeah.
BBR.
Well, yes, or you can just stick it behind the hedge, as we know.
there's also a really hot topic in legal technology, and that's the notion that you really, really, really do not want your clients keeping everything forever. So you have to have this notion of, a defensible document elimination policy and have procedures, and we call them tickler systems, where you look at something every so often and you throw out as much of it as you reasonably think you can throw out. You can't throw out anything that you think might be leading to litigation down the road, or you'll really get dinged by the courts.
I mean, this is a key thing with the human brain. Forgetting is very expensive and very important.
I think today's discussion could make a really good conference paper.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of, I mean, what we are right now, I would also say we are a bunch of nerds saying more metadata, please. Where the rub comes is in the actual interaction for creating and accessing it, which will be very, very interesting. Because, I mean, my father, he loved faxes. He used this computer and all of that, but he loved the faxes because after a while, all documents turned yellow, which was very useful.
And indeed, they do in Tinderbox. They're yellow over time. The note icons start sort of duck egg blue, and they become yellow over.
Yeah. It's a very good interaction. Affordance or whatever. Mark, when you were talking about what you did in the military, do you remember the security grade BBR? Burn before reading?
Oh, right, yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, yes, and that's
Burn
well.
before reading.
And the other great
That's the
nostrum
funniest
is
thing in
that
the world.
a secret is something you tell to only one person at a time.
Yeah, no, this one is burn before reading. So I just think that's very, very funny.
Oh yeah, well, used to use lots of those, but in a former life. So I think making phrase my low, which you guys may not have seen, is someone in UK has just found some very sensitive documents being thrown behind a hedge somewhere. So there's been much hilarity and mirth about that.
Yes.
But actually, just picking up your thing on more metadata, I just say with a caveat that it's not metadata for metadata's sense. The argument is metadata with a purpose. So it's not asking for more. It's just asking for metadata with purpose, as opposed to just keeping stuff. Because it's a bit like watching just as things were getting going in in data being an exciting thing. So people would save everything because clearly, magic stage money. So the more you save, the more money you make was their mental process. But in fact, you don't need much there. And one of the things that we've not perhaps done well, looking at sort of recent history, is actually figuring out, what it is we want to do. Now, with something like a photograph, there's lots of metadata that you do keep because it reconstructs the context of when it was made, the sort of stop, how the camera was configured. But for lots of documents, you don't need that richness. You probably need less, but you need more considered and more accurate metadata. And that's the bit we're not doing. So we can look at our organizational systems and it'll tell us hundreds of things in which we have absolutely no interest, apart from if we had to run the backup drives or something. What it doesn't tell us is what's in things and why we put them there.
That is the problem with having infinite storage. Practically speaking, for documents, that is what we have. Maybe we should make some kind of an app that takes our documents, but only the top 200. Like a physical bookshelf behind. If you want to add, you have to remove something, or you have to buy through whatever mechanism more space, but make that onerous.
Yeah. But IT managers would tell you, good luck with trying to tell the CEO to keep less stuff in his Outlook folders.
Well, it depends on who our users are. I mean, that's why I'm so excited with being able to drag up, this work I've handed in. Maybe every year you want to click a button and the whole year becomes archived and you start afresh the next year. It's about really trying to fit the specific user's pattern. And I'm just wondering what we're discussing now can actually fit in with the technologies we have for our next volume of the book.
Well, the save dialogue, definitely. I don't even really want to call it that, but this versioning capture stage. And it might not necessarily be before you give it to somebody else. It might be the moment you had that complete epiphany, you wrote that excellent bit and you said, this bit or this chapter, this is done. Absolutely, put a fork in it. The rest of it I got to do, but it's capturing these bits, some which may be for the long term, some for the medium term, but it's finding a mechanism to do it. And actually the save comes with a sort of different connotation almost. I mean, you can do the two things at the same time, but I would hesitate to make it part of a save thing, because that's almost doing, in a time now when our documents are broadly saved for us, whether we like them or not in the background, we want to make sure that we understand that what we're teaching ourselves to do is to capture moments of importance.
So one of the things you're suggesting maybe, Mark, is that you've written a section and you're happy with it, or a bit or whatever. You select that text and do Command S.
Mm-hmm.
And that save has that text as its name. So when you go through like a timeline, you can see.
You could do, though I wonder if you necessarily always know what bit. I mean, it will be convenient if there was always a bit of text that, that was short enough to fit in whatever you're going to look at it later and encapsulated that. I think it's more the thought of saying an important thing happened at this point, and I want to be able to tell my future self that this important thing happened at this point in the document, because I've got all the, we got all the diffs in between, and that's great, but they're meaningless without something that contextualizes at which point. And I think it's
I understand that
that.
you should be able to somehow label what the big change was. But I'm also wondering more from a reader's perspective, considering the book. I mean, for my personal stress of trying to sell author and reader and make a tiny bit of money, I'm the kind of mentality that the next feature will be the big one, which is pathetic. It's basically saying I don't take responsibility. So I acknowledge that's an issue. And so recently the kind of file management has been that next one, the library, the kind of thing we looked at earlier, and also how you can tag a PDF. But I have to accept that if I step back a little bit, the workflow of citation in Reader and Author is actually pretty damn good for a student, especially with the export to PDF. So I'm going to try to talk to Valentina and others about how can I communicate to universities. Author is, just for fun, phenomenal for this, or some kind of a big whatever word. That's what I have to do. But I'm thinking in terms of our book, are there things we can reasonably do that we can show that this is the most readable large volume work? We have a few little things now, but I'm sure you guys can think of something really powerful. So it's not just the future of text book, it's also the future of reading a book, right?
Sure, but the book is...
Yeah, I'm afraid I have to bow out now to provide elder care transport. So I'll see you guys on Friday.
Thanks, Peter. Very much look forward to that.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's an interesting point, like the future of the reading experience. There's a lot of, I guess, usually when we talk in the present term, right? PDF, CPUBs, all those things. But we haven't really talked a lot about, the future of reading and, like bordering science fiction a little bit. Of how it could become, and then maybe tracing the steps back to how can we get there. I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's an important conversation, and I think these chats, they sometimes go all over the place, and then we find out later why that's a good thing. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah, I'm sending all different emojis here. I couldn't get rid of them. So, listening both to Raphael and you, Frode, regarding the reading experience, we need to have different kinds of highlights when reading than kind of way of highlighting the highlights. So you can highlight freely to have as working material. If you need to reread that page later on and find a specific thing to quote maybe, or read again, and then you want some really the gold mine, the gold nuggets that you really want to take with you for the rest of your life, or really think more about. So there are different highlights, and to have that as fluid as possible, where you could really highlight something for the next decade,
I think,
or for the rest.
I think your choice of language is really very, very brilliant. You said golden. I could imagine, you know, we have all these means of highlighting text, but what if there was a key combination to make it slightly difficult, because this is not something you should do all the time. But when you do the highlight, it literally has an animation with like molten gold around it. And, you know, it becomes lifted up with, hi darling, with the options for maybe send to my special archive or something.
I have
Come.
my wee emergency.
You have a wee emergency? Okay. Oh, sorry, guys. That was not as exciting as I had hoped.
I think there's also a topic related to that, to the types of content that we are reading. Are you reading, you know, an academic paper? Are you reading, you know, a novel? Are you reading, you know, a technical book? And the experience is completely different depending on the type of content that you're reading. If I'm reading like The Hobbit, for example, I want to be in the zone. I want to be reading. I want to be immersed in the story. If I'm reading something technical, I want to quickly find what I need to find, right? And if I'm reading something, you know, maybe an academic paper, you know, I need the references. I need to keep jumping between different, you know, different files, seeing what's important from different ones. I think that exploration is very rich. There's a lot of things to find.
And I think it's. I mean, I've just finished this, which is about that very thing. And I mean, the end thing is it's slightly low balls. I guess the takeaway is it's complicated, but it does depend on what you're doing. Plus the fact that we're being driven to different directions. So the economics, for instance, are driving us to ebooks because they're cheaper. And yet studies are showing that if people have the choice, they'd either rather have both, or they'd probably rather, if they have to take something more than enjoyment from it, probably get by on print, which is probably due to mental processes rather than, you know, a sense of fashion. So teasing that apart, you know, it's very different. I mean, I read one thing that really stands clear to me at the moment is I read all my novels on a Kindle, by and large, and everything else in paper. If I tried to read this book I just read, academic book, I never got through it as an ebook. And it's also about interruptions and other things, and those are things. So, for instance, you know, how do you want to see the thing? One of the other things we discussed this morning is the ludicrous way that the journal, well, the conference we happen to be talking about, is sort of asking you to submit documents in single column, and then they're going to print them in double column. Well, that's ridiculous, because that means all the diagrams are going to fly all over the place. And it's, you know, the double column was really useful. It was developed for printability, and there is a thing that with narrow columns you can scan quite fast. But if you've got digital text, you can relay that onto screen. If you say, look, I only want an 8-word column or something.
Yeah, but okay, so the future of reading is basically articles in the book, but the future of reading the book is a bit more approachable, right? So we're just talking about the future of reading our book. You know, it should go in many directions, but at least we can demonstrate that with Reader. You know, now that we're probably doing Reader for iPad, we can make it look really, really beautiful. We can make it the most readable thing, because I think you were all here when I mentioned that students don't read much anymore. It's a really horrible number at university level. It was Andy Van Dam who first complained to me about it, and I had to look it up today. But can we do stuff that A, makes it look nice, not 2 columns, Mark, I completely agree with you, and B, has the kind of annotation that goes to the right kind of thing. It's not just red, green, and blue, not just important or whatever, but build a way that not just the visual, but the act and the experience of reading our kind of academic book becomes pleasurable. I think there's probably some low-hanging fruit if we look around properly.
And I think part of that, I mean, I wasn't being glib about the render. I think there's something in that. If there's a book, so for instance, if I'm just motoring through, you know, an airport thriller, basically, unless if the story's good enough to grip me, I just want to keep turning the pages. You know, I don't really care what was in the last paragraph. If it's good enough, the picture's in here, and basically the story is just, you know, running the picture for me in my head. If I'm reading an academic text and I need to understand something, I probably do want to know, you know, a little bit of text above and below. I need to have a sense of where I am, because I don't have one of these to stick my fingers in. And also I might want, you know, I might be on a really wide screen, but I probably don't want to fill that screen. And we sometimes forget that. We just assume that, well, we lay the text into the screen. No, we probably don't want to do that. We probably want to give people a readable amount so that they can act, so that they're not working against their sort of natural processes.
In graphic design and typography, we study, you know, how many letters per line is a good amount. If it's too short, your eyes are jumping too fast and you're constantly, you know, you have more effort to find where you are. If it's too long, you tend to lose where you were. So it's hard to jump between lines. So there is an optimal column width and an optimal character amount per line. There are a lot of studies for that. And there's also studies for, you know, how big the text should be based on either age or distance or the lighting or the screen you're using. One of the things that I do not like on the Amazon Kindle is I think the display is nice, but it's very rudimentary. So whenever you flip pages, there's that little blink in the delay, and you know, I hate that. It gets me crazy. But I mean, it's amazing to read outside in the sun, and you know, and all those things that, you know, the electronic ink is amazing, but the technology is just not there yet. So the iPad gives me a better experience, but the display is glossy and it's heavier, you know, it's either or, but the display is in color, so you can have pictures and videos together. So it's.
But a good thing that you know, what one lucky thing in a sense is coming for free, because you've already done it in Author, is this sense of, you know, the sort of Doug idea of being able to expand out in and out to headings and things like this. So if you write with intent and you write with structure, you're in the process of making it easier to get back to that. And that's one of, you know, that's one of the reasons you got to take a book and you'll sort of stick fingers in the side, because you know roughly, if I can look at it and say, oh, roughly this far in is where that was, and you can use that. So now you haven't got that on an electronic document, whether it's just a, you know, facsimile photocopy inside a PDF, or whether it's actually digital text. And one of the things that I remember when I first started using Kindles that freaked me out was when I finally learned to just let go of what page I was on, because I didn't care. It's a novel. I really didn't care. What was much more useful to know is that at this reading speed, you're probably going to get to the end of the chapter in 2 minutes. Good, I'll do that and I'll go to bed. So in other words, we should think about, and this is both in the authoring and the reading, so to use the new medium that we have. So for instance, we can lay out that text at a size and a spacing and a line length that is comfortable to read, because if we need to get to section 4, we've got a really easy way to do it. We don't have to think, God, I've got to now go scroll up and down the side panel of my PDF reader or something. We don't have to do that. And therefore, our need to make the screen look like the paper facsimile, even if there is one, I think is lessened without, and it doesn't necessarily have to be worse.
Absolutely, but just to harp back a bit, considering, you know, we're on one topic book, this thing about different kinds of highlights, extreme sense. Do you guys use Notion or Roam or any one of those tools?
No, but Notion is nice, but it's the thing with Notion for me is that it takes a lot of effort to come up with a system and a design that works and looks good. Yeah. And then you have to invest a lot of time and effort for Notion to reach a point that it's extremely usefulness for, you know, internal documentation, for references, for a lot of things.
That's a very interesting point.
But is that not true? I mean, I think I don't think it has to be that way, but I think it's certainly true. I mean, the tool I use at Tinderbox, and I've got years invested in that, and I'm constantly saying, helping people to get to that point more quickly. But you're absolutely right, and reference manager is exactly the same. You start with it, and what's the point? And then you suddenly realize, you're actually building value in your curation.
So let me,
But you don't. But we're talking about the fact we may not need, by having other mechanisms, there may be a whole class of tool that we don't need anymore.
so the question, the reason I asked the question is, if you were using something and Mark is using Tinderbox, maybe it would be useful, select text and send it to Tinderbox or Notion or Roam with a reference or with a citation, right? So you highlight it into that thing.
I have built. I mean, I don't use that sort of thing, but I've actually built them for other people, so they can highlight a bit on a page, and just done it as a Mac service.
But the other thing we could do, because we have the architecture for glossaries, is to do a new thing where when you select something special and you do a special command, it lifts that up and you can tag it, or you can write something. You have a little bit of a dialogue, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It puts it in a similar environment to the concept map / glossary thing.
Okay. I think a challenge in the context of Future of Text is because it is a compendium of individual articles written from a wide variety of perspectives. So although they have a common, although it has a common meta theme, they're really quite different. So a lot of the things that we've been talking to thus far are more things that will tend to have a consistent narrative within them, in terms of be it the structure of the artwork, or the story running through it, or the style of the writing. Whereas in that sense, Future of Text is actually quite an unusual book, because it's got lots of chapters, short chapters written by very different people.
It's a journal, I think. I think it's very
Okay.
nice for a journal.
It's not a critique. I'm just sort of surfacing the fact that it's a different sort of reading experience.
But
Yeah,
if you
I see the book as if it's broken down into smaller parts, that's the format that for me would make a lot of sense, because you'd be able to focus on the article experience, that journal experience, and then also have complementary information either regarding the person or the topics, and you could jump around to find, like it is on Reader, like, oh, this person talked about this, but this other person also talked about it.
Yeah.
So maybe I want to read it based on just everybody that talked about hypertext, or maybe everybody that talked about transclusion, and then as we build upon the contents of the book, there's going to be more and more people that starts to gain even more value by having more contents.
What you're saying then is, right now we have select the word hypertext, do Command F, it shows you all the sentences, but you want to have a similar command, select the word hypertext and see only the sections that mention that. So that's similar to what we talked about with bindings, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess that would be right. Yeah.
And sort of, because also what Raphael sort of, this foreshadows, in a sense, we're trail building here, because one of the things in essence you've said is that, okay, so and let's say where I got volume 2 by this stage, what I'd really like to find is all the articles discussing this topic. Now, they may not be discussing it from the same context, for instance, but they're all germane, it's germane to all those things. So that this is a stranding that runs across the binding, which in this case, by this point might be 2 volumes, and across all the discrete articles. Right. And it's slightly different to search. And it's not quite tagging either, because tagging is a bit brutal and tends to break apart after a while.
Yeah, but I mean, I could imagine you do, let's say, Command B, because we're in reading, not writing, and you type in the word hypertext or select and do Command B. And then when you get this, only section headings that have that text in it listed as a new table of contents. And the book now is like that. You can do whatever you want within it. But you could also actually generate a URL or a descriptor or whatever that you could share with someone else, and they would get that same thing, that's the same collection, right?
Just being perverse for a moment, how do you then tag the thing that is about the subject but doesn't use the word that you would use to tag it?
You don't.
So I've come across quite a lot.
Well, I mean, you could manually do it, say, add this one, add that one, that would be one interface as well. Adam, I'm sure you have something to.
Yeah, I want to. I really think human curation should be higher up on the list. I don't want to do, too often we talk about either AI or search as a replacement for human curation. And I don't think that is true at all, because there could be 50 articles mentioning hypertext, but maybe 20 of them are rubbish or not really relevant to hypertext more in a deeper sense. So we really should, in all our tools, find a way to make human curation easier. And not the automatic curation or the searching. Searching is fine for some scenarios, but I don't think we should overvalue searching. The most important thing is when someone has really thought about making a list or making a selection and finding the best quotes or so. In a way, you could find quotes as well just by searching, but that is not a good way. We really need a way to find and also not just making a list, but also ranking the list. I think that is one of the hardest problems. In which order should you read them or frankly, which one is best according to some person?
Yeah,
the order things actually I find quite interesting because you don't necessarily have to do that from a particularly objective standpoint and say, in terms of I value this article more, but there are definitely cases where you said you would do better to read this one before that one, because effectively this one, by reading this one first, you will understand the other one better, or you may understand the critique it's doing, which isn't necessarily applying a particular value to either, but you're doing a really useful thing in terms of effectively the trail you might follow through this thing. So that, I mean, I don't know, I want to see if I can try and track down, I don't know where David LeBeau's got with his highlighter stuff, he was looking at it, and I don't know whether it's produced a very personal trail, which I suspect it has, of things he found to highlight in it, rather than this meta text that I think we're talking about, where, the people feed in this overlayer that's saying, right, if you want to know about, who's talking about typography, right, well, the things that relate to typography are this. And it's not so much that the word turns up, but here's someone talking about the effect it has on how we understand it. Here's someone talking about it as an aesthetic expression. This draws on ones that you'll find previously in this article. So we got this really interesting set of essays over time from all sorts of perspectives, and creating that overlayer. Now that's massively rich. It's effectively a commentary metadata, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm cool with that. I'm just a bit wary of officially doing that. However, it seems to me that one of the things we're dreaming about is you pinch the book into an outline, but that outline is completely editable. You can drag things up and down, you can hide things, you can delete it, you can write things next to it. And that view is what you can share with someone else.
It's a really interesting way of doing a synopsis, actually.
But Frode, when you say outline, do you mean that some things can be expanded? Because what I'm imagining is that we have rather because that the outline feels more like an outside in, outside in perspective, that you have the structure and headings and so on, and I'm very interested in the other way, the inside out, where you have specific things that you can sample for an article, that you can taste the language, taste the ideas, you can get a sense of what that person is and if it resonates with you by having that sampling. And the heading may do that, but usually it doesn't for me.
Right. So what I'm talking about is, this is the Future of Text book, and I've done Command minus and Reader. So here is an outline that is generated by the Visual Meta. So I can click to jump to different people, right? So I'm just wondering if an idea would be that you as a reader, you could click maybe here on the side and drag him up there. And then you could maybe drag this one to the side, like to hide it. And then you could maybe click in the side here and write, this is a brilliant piece for history, or whatever it might be. So does that make sense based on what you're saying?
Yep, but what I would like to have in this view is actual quotes, the text and deep down into, so it could be a person's
yeah, but
name and a title. So we could see the quote inside that view to get the
Oh, sorry, like this.
yeah, more like that.
Mhm.
So
And
what this,
personally, I want to do it on a map rather than a list, but you know, hey ho, that could be later.
no, but I mean, what this is it's just you select text, you do H for highlight, right?
Mhm.
And if you do H without selecting text, it shows you the highlights with the headings. It should hide everything that doesn't have a heading, but no, excuse me, that doesn't have highlights. But at least it's part of the way there, right? But what was the thing you said you wanted a map, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, in a sense, but because I guess it's the way I think about things. I'm not particularly linear in that sense. So it's more that I might want to put all the things that are one theme on one side and others on another, because what I'm looking at the interplay of the two rather than, and I don't want to make too much a thing about linear or not, but it's just that it's partly the thinking process. Now, it might be to share it with somebody else. I may then turn that into a thing, because actually what I'm trying to do at the end of it is to say, look, start here and go through them in this order. But to get to that point, I find it quite hard to work in a linear structure. But you've got the building blocks and most of that there. So I think the thing is to not try and force it out. I mean, so what I'm taking from this is really one of the things we need to think about is probably effectively populating, getting some information that delivers slightly on this idea, what are all the articles on subject X? And how difficult is it then to work with that?
Yeah, that's,
which ones, for instance, don't turn up in the text, which do, which are the ones that turn up in the text that are inappropriate. So, and how do we signal that? Things, but I suspect that, and I think back to Adam's last comment, when I sent you all that data, I said, oh, this is interesting, because I can do stuff with the data rather than actually have to worry about getting it to work. So we got nice data in the book. So I think one of the things is to extract some stuff, and then we can see how messy that is.
but what about something like you highlight in different ways for different things, questions, things later, good stuff. You go into this kind of a view where you see headings and highlighted texts. In that view, maybe that's where you do the curation for what highlighted stuff should go further. So you can easily click on them and choose to send them to your knowledge graph of whatever.
Yeah.
But what if it turned up in your concept map instead, or one concept map, not the concept map, but your other concept map? So it's more spatial. Would that be? It's a list.
I don't mind
better
now, because the book is linear. It is a bound book. Of course, we're trying to go beyond that. No question.
But is it linear really when you? I don't read it. Is it so linear?
It is linear, but it doesn't have to mean the experience is linear. Absolutely. Right?
No, but even the book is not linear in that sense. It's not the narrative from A to Z, really.
But what it is, it does have pages after each other, right? So if someone has a heading here and then you have their quotes underneath, when you go in and out of that view, for them to move around, that's what I mean, might be an issue.
Yeah, so individual articles are linear, but not the book in itself. It's not very linear in this sense, and not how we approach it either. We usually open it in the middle or browse it a bit, and that's not linear either. And you have an overview, you start looking at the page and then finding your way. That's not linear either. So
Well,
It's
now-
not that linear.
Now we're going down to definitions, and what you're saying, I
Okay.
completely agree with you. Yes, absolutely. But I'm just saying that, you know, you can think a little deeper than I can at this point, because I get a bit stressed about the implementation aspect of it. But there's no question that when you choose to view highlights or annotations or whatever in a book, you should have a very rich freedom of how to do that and how to share them.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I gotta go make dinner now.
I gotta
Interesting.
go
We
make lunch.
keep thinking about things like this for Fridays. So because we need to both invite people and to explain to them they're going to be part of a new kind of book. Make a bit of a deal of, you know, we haven't invented everything with reading, but we've done a few things.
So if I should do a homework here, or a kind of a mock-up or something similar to what I did with Mark's data,
Well, my dream is very simple. For
what
your
would
work.
that be for the future of text? I can't promise to build a full system, but I could do some visualizations to
Oh,
have
you
as a
can't.
discussion.
Now I feel cheated. Well, I have some of this is not relevant for you. Some of it is. Let me just skip through. I just put a few. No, that's not it. There was, yeah, so this kind of stuff is how I've been thinking before, along with what you and Mark are doing. You know, how do we do kind of listy things? So what views and how? This is actually the one that I really, really like, because it is not very well done. This is all very rough, but the idea is you click on a document and you get a bigger card about it. You get to see the abstract and stuff like that. But on the left now, everything that isn't cited disappears. On the right, everything that cites it is the only one that's shown. You click outside and it goes back to the default view. So it's basically a way to traverse with, you know, and it doesn't even have the dates or anything. You can keep that, that would be wonderful. But it just makes it really quickly to see this document cites this stuff. And if I click on any of those, that goes to the center and everything, you know, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
there are different kind of
absolutely.
ways to play with that.
Would that work for future of the text? Because I guess there aren't that many citations between the articles. This is really good, but more for a reference, a richer reference manager.
Yeah, and I was thinking more about what you have with the ACM hypertext data.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is actually more useful. And I think because journals aren't usually bound, they seem to be individual papers now. It would be interesting to see how, if we pretend Future of Text is a journal from a conference, if we pretend that's what it is, to see how that kind of a binding fits in here, either as individual articles or as a volume. You could break it up and treat every single article as a paper.
And I think, if I'm right, well, I don't think I've given you the tags, but I could give you the tags that I've got for articles that had tags. So in the data set I've got of ACM, I'm talking about the authors tags. So that's the one they put in there, some of which I've had to extract from papers, some of which have been extracted, and some people just haven't used them at all. So they may not all be there, but I think apart from that, I've probably, so I can feed that into the data set I said you already sent you. But otherwise, I think everything that one might want to do to create that picture that Freud's just shown should be, I mean, I think I've got it. And if I haven't got it in a form that you can use it, I can damn well make it.
Yeah, that would be, I think, I'm just going to send you a screenshot. I think it would be just absolutely ridiculously wonderful.
Okay, so let's try that first, and we'll think more about the future text, how to do the jumping between articles or finding the right articles. And
I think FOT needs us to have created effectively that layer of that binding layer of commentary metadata, call it what you will, whereas we sort of get it for free via the citation structure in this other data set.
Because the thing that excites me no ends is what we did earlier today with the visual meta reference style to get that un-nonsensy is that if someone were to go through what Mark has done and take all the references and all the documents and mark it up like that, then all the linkages would just work in your view, right? And it also means that if future conferences would happen to have this automatically done, that means you can just keep adding PDFs. Your system can parse it and you get all these views. You know, instead of having to buy EndNote or Mendeley or some proprietary database, it would be just absolutely magical. The things we can do then would include the thing of annotate anywhere, find your stuff, you know, out of the space that you're building, it could come in there, all kinds of things. It would be just super powerful.
And the interesting thing that I've learned from, you know, backfilling what's not been put into proceedings, which admittedly are different to a journal, because with a journal, what you see is what you get. That's what's published. It's effectively a book. With proceedings, what you see are the papers presented at it, or certainly with technical proceedings. But as I experienced last week, the most interesting part of Web Science last week was actually not the papers, the talks, the plenaries, the panels, the workshops, tutorials. Much more interesting because it's an emergent field, and that disappears. It's gone, not recorded at all. And it should be there because there is some really interesting crosscut to be done there as to see how that's informed by the work within the field, or whether it's in the field or elsewhere. And that may be there because the creators of that tutorial or workshop, or whatever, actually explicitly noted it, or it could be almost sort of, you know, crowdsourced, or even sort of artificially AI type sourced. Because that's also an interesting part of the broader sense of citation, or the relevance network that I see when Fred, you know, when you showed that picture just now, this stuff down the sides, that's important. That's showing you where we came from and where we're going, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. And if I can show you something else. Hang on, I've lost you.
Weren't you cooking dinner?
Yeah,
Emily,
Emily,
400 kids.
Can you put the oven on 190, please, darling? Okay.
Oh, job done. That's it. You relax now.
I don't want my secret to get out. So there's a thing down here that I wanted to show you, and that is, oops. Oh, no, not that. Go back. Oh, that must have been an animation because it suddenly just went still. Right. This is something kind of fun. So here we have normal kind of a, don't move on your own. Okay, we'll just freeze it here. The text, hypertext here, is a search term.
Mm-hmm.
So you write that in, you can change the color if you want, which may be useful. The idea is that it draws a line to the document that contains that term. The thicker lines, the ones that contains it the more times, right? So you can then drag these things anywhere you want. Here, you have so many documents that they have been fogged. Right, so you have an idea that there are many documents, but these are the ones that talk about Ted. These are the ones that talk about Doug, blah, 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 right? This is the kind of, if we have the full text, fantastic. If we have at least the abstract and keywords, we can start doing this stuff. None of this is new inventions. This is all, I think we've all been looking at this in myriads of ways over the last billion years. But with these architectures, we can do it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, keywords goes to this. These are the authors of this and this paper. You can line them up because they're not necessarily the same thing.
But
so
even seeing this,
send me this keynote or a few slides of it, and I'll try to mock something up here from what you've shown, and that can be a basis for your further author work, and also as a demonstration for others.
It's really interesting to see this because, you know, the thing I'm constantly reminding myself is a lot of people can't imagine that. I mean, and even when you show it to them, they can't. They actually probably need you to see one that actually moves before they begin. And it's not a intelligence thing; it's just a perspective thing. But I think of this sort of this way of interacting data is incredibly rich. and they're things we need. We're just not making them because all the attention, the money is just elsewhere.
Sent. I did actually call
Yeah, I
it
have to go,
Adam
guys.
Workspace. What's
I'll
that?
see you all on Friday.
Yeah,
Yeah, look forward
good
to
to
it. Good to talk.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
And Adam, let me know if you want anything more. I'll definitely, I'll leave it at there. So, but it sounds like you definitely could do to have keywords. And I'll also try and make you a list. Oh, so you're on mute.
I had my midsummer fog here this weekend, so I haven't thought too much about anything
That's fine.
regarding this. But let's try Frode's alternative view first, just to get a feeling when it's not timelined, but more in a kind of a hypertext way, when you can jump from article to article, but not really.
What I meant is that you've got the information to do that, hopefully in the data set that I sent you. So the only thing he's using is I can give you keywords. I can definitely do that. I'm not sure what else. I need to look at the picture. See, there are a few other things.
But let's get it up on the screen first in the other view, and to see where we can go from that. And maybe actually both views could be on the screen at the same time, or the first view could be below it as the full view of a paper, where you see the paper and all the rich citations. So you could hide the timeline if you want to, or.
Well, and the next step we can do is go towards TED's connected citations. But this is too exciting. Anyway, this is wonderful. I look forward to Friday. I look forward to seeing what's possible, and we'll keep thinking about making the future of text readable.
Yep.
All right. Bye, guys.
Good.
Thank you. Bye.